And we should be live. How's it going? My name is Aaron Shoemaker. I'm working with the PSF to help develop the dev school, doing some videos with Chris, and also working on some of the... I'm here kind of like a coder, like a bunch of people, and trying to figure things out.
Like the big block camp was much more aligned with the ability to scale as appropriately, but still be able to do Lightning Network and everything else. So to me, it's sort of odd that that we've splintered as a community so harshly. And then even the point where I went to and said, well, this permissionless software foundation is building on the tools that are really scalable and interesting and can be built in a way that makes something really interesting. Like even just the fact that you've done end-to-end encryption with the BCS message, the message.fullstack.cash is something that no one's really done yet, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, Zcash is just beginning to do that. They've got some stuff. So I just appreciate the fact that you guys are building really amazing tools that makes something small group of people doing it, and you're making it available. And what you guys did with the video you did this last week, where you actually watched you two go through, show how to do it, is just amazing, because it allows people to not feel like they're making mistakes, because everyone makes mistakes in the beginning, but feels like I'm getting somewhere. So Aaron Sunman, I'm just glad to be a part of this. I've been a dev for a while, and just excited to be a part of this.
Oh, that's great, man. Yeah, welcome to the party.
Yes, we had a little problem with audio going out to YouTube there. Sorry everybody, we've had problems with Zoom audio today, and so and then On-Chain Stanley said, did we miss introductions? Well,
yeah, let's just do it again.
Yes, we missed all but what Chris was saying, is what On-Chain Stanley. So we'll just do introductions again. On-Chain, can you hear us now? Let's see. Yes, but we missed all of what Chris was saying. So it's you, Chris. They want you to.
Oh,
they want to
okay.
hear your beautiful voice.
Yeah, I was just given the same introduction that I give every week, that I founded the PSF and I manage fullstack.cash blockchain as a service, and really appreciate those people watching on YouTube giving us feedback, because you're essentially our QA team. So yeah, we're all making this happen. So good. So it sounds like they did get the other two people's intros. So with that, I'm going to share my screen and move right into the agenda today.
All right.
There we go. Okay, looks like it's up. Thank you, Aaron. Yeah, so as always, our agendas are on GitHub under the Permissionless Software Foundation GitHub group, under the TSC repository for Technical Steering Committee, and we file them as issues. And all the previous agendas are there. They're just closed to issues. And we always include our links to the Zoom meeting and the YouTube channel, and Odyssey, as we're also uploading to Odyssey. Okay, so as every couple weeks when we have this meeting, our community's not yet really big enough to have the sort of formal meetings that these are set up to handle. So instead, the focus of these meetings really is to just celebrate the technical achievements that we've had over the last 2 weeks, to share them with the rest of the community. So we'll go over this agenda, and then at the end of the agenda, we'll open it up as sort of a round robin, just to cover any sort of news items or cool tech that people have heard about and want to talk about. So first, I'll focus on this PSF core, and there's a link here to a blog article that explains what our PSF core software is. It's our BCH API, REST API, BCH.js JavaScript library, and the Gatsby IPFS web wallet, Gatsby theme. And then there's other software that support those three main pieces of software, but that's essentially what we consider our core. And the last couple of weeks, there's been some pretty big changes to the JavaScript library, BCH.js. The latest version is 4.20.10. I recommend everybody update to it. There was an issue with JOT tokens. People who had been using the fullstack.cash service to get increased rate limits, they were reporting issues that I was really having a hard time replicating. And so I've come up with a series of tools and debugging stuff around that. But I finally found this bug. It was a very subtle bug where it was around the this keyword. So anybody who's familiar with JavaScript and using the this keyword, they know that can be tricky. It was losing its context. And so it was reverting back to the older rate limits. And that was the issue that people had been reporting to me. And so I'm glad I was able to finally find it and fix it. So that's fixed. If anybody out there has been having rate limit issues using the BCH.js library, it's now fixed in this newer version. And if you do run into issues, please contact me and we'll work through it. There was an issue with token validation via the SLPDB whitelist. Yeah, so one of the ways that I have, so SLPDB is the indexer that tracks all the SLP tokens on the Bitcoin Cash network. And this database is very resource intensive. And one of the ways that I've been advocating that people scale the token economy on BCH is to use these whitelist SLPDBs. So it ignores all tokens except the ones that are explicitly in the whitelist. And this lets you run smaller infrastructure. It's much more scalable this way. And I think that this is the way. So anyways, what happened was that the SLPDB whitelist server that I operate, I normally only allocate 8 gigabytes of RAM, and that's been sufficient, as opposed to 32 gigabytes of RAM, which is a general purpose SLPDB, which is what that requires. Well, it fell over. Apparently, it needs more than 8 gigabytes, even if you're running a whitelist. So I bumped that up to 16 gigabytes. It's up and running. It's running fine now, but it also showed that if that's not running, because there's this waterfall validation method in BCH.js where it goes out. If you ask it, like, I have this token and I want to make sure that it's a valid token before I try and spend it or have it show up in the wallet. And it'll do this sort of waterfall validation where it checks with the whitelist SLPDB first, because that's the smallest and the fastest. Then if that fails, it'll go to the general purpose SLPDB. And then if that fails, it'll go to SLP API, which is a pure JavaScript implementation that sort of checks the DAG on the fly. So it's essentially trying to go from the most performant to the least performant validation method. And what I found was that if this whitelist server fell over, it would essentially stop the execution there if it couldn't communicate with that. So that's been fixed. If for some reason in the future the whitelist server is not available for whatever reason, it'll just skip it and move on to the general purpose. It'll keep trying these other methods to try and validate the token. So got a little deep in the weeds, but this is a technical meeting, so that's the situation there. Also, while we were at it, we ran NPM audit. So BCH.js has 0 reported vulnerabilities. That's always a good thing to have. So that wraps up the BCH.js. Aaron's, feel free to jump in here if you guys have any questions. Also, Aaron Shoemaker, if you see any questions on YouTube, let me know. Feel free to interrupt me at any time if you guys want any more info.
We just have Crazy Money in the chat says PSF merch win. So we got some people wanting PSF merch.
That's a good idea. Yeah, that's definitely something to think about. Good way for the DAO to raise some funds.
Plus, I think it's also something that you get more people wearing something like that. Like, hey, what is that? I think that's a good idea. Crazy Money.
Yeah. Thanks for the suggestion, Crazy Money. And anybody else in the chat, feel free to chat, and we will read your comments on air as long as they are appropriate.
Okay, so moving away from the core software, the JSON RPC over IPFS and the pay-to-write database have been two big focuses of mine and Daniel, and then Gary as well. And so just to refresh people, well, actually, there's this video at the top here that I recommend everybody check into because it's fairly non-technical. It's very high level, and it's only about 15 minutes long. And this video on PSF architectural trajectory, I made it earlier this week, and it's really trying to just communicate the trajectory that we're on in terms of our architecture and how it works, and it very much addresses this current issues around regulation. For those who don't know, there was a very, very poorly written law that was passed with the infrastructure bill last week by the U.S. Senate, and is currently working its way through Congress. And if it passes, which it probably will, it's incredibly overly broad and will probably bring significant regulation to the entire crypto industry. And so what this video covers and the trajectory that we're on is very much a way to resist regulation. And I share this diagram in this video where on the left is wallet.fullstack.cash, which is our web wallet. And the left side path sort of shows the dependencies of software as it exists today using the REST API. And then the path on the right replaces the REST API using HTTP with a JSON RPC using IPFS. And so this is a much more censorship resistant way of allowing computers on the internet to talk to one another. And so this is the trajectory we're on. And we're starting it. All the names in these boxes these are repositories within the Permissionless Software Foundation GitHub area. And so I encourage any developers watching this, check out these repositories. Please ask questions about them in the Telegram channel. But anyways, this is the trajectory we're on. And if you want to know more, I recommend checking out this video. And but basically, one thing I do want to point out is that minimal SLP wallet at the center, that is currently the wallet engine that runs the web wallet, and this is that's going to be the relay or the point that switches from centralized mode to decentralized mode. That's the element that will allow us to switch from the REST API over HTTP paradigm to the JSON RPC over IPFS paradigm.
Sounds good.
Yeah. So I'll leave it there. I love talking about this. I don't want to get on a soapbox if there's not any active questions about it. But I really would love to see more developers use this software. It's still very much in development, and so it's as it reaches maturity, I'm hoping I can entice more developers to work into it. And in fact, on that note, I'll just jump down to this item. There is a major refactor of the IPFS chord library underway. I'm probably about 70% done with it. And that's at the heart. That is the thing that unlocks the JSON RPC over IPFS and unlocks the censorship resistance and privacy enhancement. So a very important library. And then in addition, Daniel's been working very steadily increasing the unit tests and test coverage of the pay-to-write database. We're very close to 100% test coverage. And so just as a refresher, the pay-to-write database is a peer-to-peer database. It works very much like a blockchain in that each person maintains their own copy of their database, and all the databases coordinate over IPFS using a consensus mechanism, or essentially it's written into the code. And so this is going to be a really important part of the PSF because the pay-to-write database, if we can successfully build apps that use it, will steadily consume PSF tokens. and that will be good that will help fund additional development by increasing the price of the PSF token. So that's why this whole section, the JSON RPC over IPFS and the pay to write database, gets talked about every week or every other week.
It's cool tech, and it's exciting to see it being developed. So,
thanks, man. Thanks. Go ahead.
Well, I'm just saying this is a big piece because we saw what's happening with Shapeshift and realizing that all of the stuff that's happening, including the bill that's just passed the Senate and not in the House yet, but is going to impact every one of us, and especially if we're trying to work on permissionless stuff. The crazy part about it, nothing moves forward if it requires permission. We see what happened with telecoms and everything else when everything requires permission all the time. This is what's really required to have things move forward. And I'd hate to have anybody, especially associated with this, get in trouble because of it. It feels like it's got to go through this sort of removal of, I guess they call it broker status for anything that anybody who touches it, right? It's just not a fair comparison, and it'll limit innovation dramatically. So I appreciate everything you're doing to keep this organized and keep it true that way.
Thanks, man. Yeah, let's take a minute. Since you mentioned Shapeshift, I'd like to give an update because I've been trying to let me just cover this last agenda item, and then I'd love to give an update on my experience with Shapeshift. Last agenda item, Gary Nadir, who is another developer in Venezuela, who's working with the PSF. He's sort of our resident Avalanche blockchain expert, and he's been maintaining Avix Cli wallet, which I need to update a link to that. That's another repo. Very similar experience to SLP Cli wallet. But on the Avalanche blockchain. And he added a create token command. So you can use that command to create tokens on the Avalanche blockchain on their X chain. And there was a bug in the send all command, which he's fixed. So that command line wallet is actually working really well. And so anybody who wants to dip their toes in the water of the Avalanche blockchain, this is a really approachable way to do it. So I'll leave that there. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing. But yeah, on the topic of Shapeshift, I've been participating in their DAO. I actually just recently bought $50 worth of Fox tokens so that I have, because basically if you don't own a Fox, they're a DAO. And so everything that happens, you vote on it and you use your tokens to vote on it. And I'm really watching them closely for lessons to be learned that we can then apply to our own DAO. But there's philosophically, there's quite a lot of room for alignment between the PSF and Shapeshift, because Shapeshift is focused on trading or swapping tokens across blockchains. And we are a blockchain agnostic organization that is also focused on moving assets across blockchains. So there's a lot of room for alignment there. And I've been in touch with some of the community leaders there. They are interested in the tech that we've developed for our VIP room, because they similarly need the same thing of increasing the signal and decreasing the noise so that people can quickly identify the community leaders. And what else did I want to share? There's just a lot of lessons to be learned. It's pretty, they're getting started fairly slowly. And they are also working very closely with MakerDAO. I was in the second governance meeting with members of MakerDAO, and MakerDAO, they are stewards of the DAI algorithmic stablecoin, for those who don't know. And MakerDAO started as a DAO, and then they incorporated, I'm theorizing here, but I believe they incorporated because they moved from a single asset to a multi-asset. And some of those assets are things like USDC. So I think they needed bank accounts for that.
Right.
And in order to sort of get those partnerships going. But now they've realized that was not the right move for long-term health. And so they are now in the process of unwinding their corporate structure and moving back into a pure DAO. And then Shapeshift has always been a corporate structure. and they are now in the process of unwinding that corporate structure and becoming a DAO. And so these are the only two companies that I know of that were companies and are disassembling the company to become a DAO. There might be other cases, I just don't know of them. I really think in terms of like being on the cutting edge, I think that is the cutting edge, because this is the next step in this cat and mouse game of regulation. There is nothing to regulate. There is no CEO. There are no bank accounts to shut down. There's just people working together on a common goal, using the token to coordinate that human effort. And so I'm very inspired by this, and very much looking at both of those organizations for inspiration and guidance as our own DAO progresses.
Right. Well, I agree. I mean, that's one of the things I've really enjoyed Eric Voorhees' ideas, even back when they did Prism. I don't know if you remember when they did a smart contract sort of collection where you pay one thing and you get a collection of different tokens associated with that, and they're the counterparty. And so they built a whole bunch of smart contracts. And a lot of what ended up happening was a lot of other things were based off that. Like, it started with them doing that. I think that's a similar idea with what's going to happen with corporations turning into DAOs. Mm-hmm. So we don't know many now, but I think there'll be a lot more. And they're blazing a path that I think is a great move for us to at least look at and learn from.
Yeah, I mean, and people, as this progresses, for better or worse, people are going to focus on the attempt to escape regulation, which I'm very much aligned with. But I think some of the other things that are going to get lost, that are important features as well in DAOs, is that they allow the organization to employ anyone anywhere. And whereas like Shapeshift, the company, Eric even said like they would never hire anyone in France because of all the regulations in French. It's a nightmare. But as a DAO, they're not hiring anyone. People are just working, and there are bounties and things that people can do. And if they do them, they get rewarded in tokens, and that's all handled by smart contracts. There's no humans involved there. So there's nothing for the government to, prevent from happening. So it's just anyone anywhere can participate. And I think that is equally important as the ability to escape regulatory capture. And but I think that is going to get lost in the as this becomes more in vogue.
Well, I think that you also have to bear in mind, as these new ways of working develop, we're going to have to figure out, how do we know who's in it for the long haul, who's not, and figure out good ways of separating the wheat from the chaff. We've talked about this problem with open source software, with like drive-by code contributions and stuff like that. That's a problem we've been talking about with the dev school, saying, is there a way that we can bring people in, acclimate them to, because the DAOs are still going to have a community or a culture, and we need people to acclimate to that in a certain way. And how do we bring them in that and keep them from slowing things down, so to speak? Those are questions we're going to have to answer. And what does that look like? I don't know, but it is things that I'm exploring with my own businesses. So.
Yeah, that is a really good topic that you raised. I am going to try and see if I can quickly pull up the Shapeshift. They have an excellent infographic on how they are managing their workflows. Like they're still working it out, but I think they have the broad strokes, the skeleton of it laid out pretty well. Let's hope that I can get to it quickly. But another thing while I'm pulling this up that I wanted to bring up is this, the video that Aaron and I did showing how to use SLP Clywalt. That got a lot of positive feedback. And I'm wondering if anybody watching YouTube or the members here in Telegram or in Zoom have ideas on what they would like to see next. I personally, I'd like to show how to start a full node and then how to start indexers, and then we could build up to running BCH API. Because I'd really like to see more people running their own infrastructure. That's me, but I'm wondering if anybody else has other thoughts.
No, that's good. We'd love to hear from you guys on what you'd like to see done. Maybe we should take a trip through the Avex Cli wallet. That's another idea.
Yeah, that would be a natural extension to what we covered in the last video.
Yeah.
If anybody hasn't watched it that's on YouTube right now, one of the reasons I would say definitely watch Chris and Aaron. They are on together walking through how to use the BCH Cli wallet, and sometimes Aaron's making a mistake and Chris is helping, and sometimes there's an error, but it really helps us all realize that we all start somewhere. We're all learning. And, I think that's a really great example of someone going, look, all you need to do is download Node.js on your computer, pull that GitHub repository down and start trying. Mm-hmm. I mean, and the great part about the point you made in the video, Chris, was that you don't need the testnet, specifically because BCH is so easy and inexpensive to use. Besides the fact that, you can put 20 cents out there and you can do all of this work, and you can move sats around. It's super inexpensive. You're working on it. You're not worried about losing 20 cents because who cares? Put another 20 cents and put it, So I love the fact that you guys have done that, and I appreciate that. I personally, one of the things that I did right now is I did it on Windows, and I also brought it up on a DigitalOcean Ubuntu box, and I realized that I've got some permissions issues and I don't know where they're at. So, I mean, if you do it on Linux and on Windows too, I realize that's a lot of additional work, but that'd be great stuff, because to your point, I'm not going to dev on Windows. I mean, it's not going to run on Windows later, so I might as well move it to my Linux box instead. So stuff like that would be helpful.
Yeah, Aaron's bringing up something that we talked about before this live stream. Is as a personal choice, as for me as a developer, I try to develop on the same system that I deploy to, which is Ubuntu. That way I don't have surprises. When I used to develop on Windows, I'd have all sorts of issues. And I also see other devs today still have these issues when they go to deploy something. There's just a little subtle difference between running no JavaScript on Windows and no JavaScript on Ubuntu. But virtually all of the web is deployed on Linux machines. So you're going to have a really hard time trying to be a dev that doesn't use Linux.
Yeah, Linux. I like Linux better. In that video, I was using Git Bash, which is like the terminal simulator for Windows, because I learned to use command line with Linux. So Git Bash just makes sense.
And I'm really glad we did that, because a lot of developers do start on Windows, as hobbyists, as they're learning. You use whatever tools you have at your fingertips, and a lot of times that is Windows.
Yeah, right. Yeah. A lot of people get a Windows computer and they don't know if they want to wipe it and reinstall Linux. So, but you could always use a virtual machine if you wanted to and run some Linux and then dev in that. So.
Yeah, and I'm a big advocate of that. Like, if people, if they get sort of frustrated, if they're trying to use Windows and they get sort of frustrated trying to use some of the software that the PSF puts out, $5 a month or less, I think $2.50 a month will get you a VPS on like Linode or Vultr or DigitalOcean. The sign-up process is very fast. There's also, the name's escaping me, but there is a website that lets you buy a VPS with Bitcoin Cash, and you can do it anonymously. And you can either choose to use, I think it's Vultr or Hetzner or DigitalOcean, and then the price is different, but essentially what you get is a Linux machine in the cloud. And Rick Neum just said Sporestack is something worth checking out as well. So anyways, these are all ways to inexpensively and very quickly get access to a Linux terminal, and then all of our software will run, because that's the OS that all of our software targets.
Adam Chubnikoff in the chat says you could always do a second physical machine, and that's true. You can go to Craigslist and usually get a secondhand computer pretty cheap, that you can run some of this stuff on. And also a Pi 400, which is a Raspberry Pi and a keyboard and all like that. All of our software will run on that, because I have one and I run all the software on it. So, and those are relatively cheap. The Pi 400 with the keyboard, $100. And then I want to give a shout out to Sam I Am Records in the chat. And I want to let you know I dropped the link to the video we've been talking about in the chat for you, Sam. So
Nice.
yeah.
So I managed to find that. I'm going to share my screen.
All right.
And I managed to find the Shapeshift Governance diagram that I was looking for. So there's multiple ways to access this. I access it through Boardroom. Shapeshift this is sort of the go-to dashboard for interacting with the governance process in Shapeshift. But this is actually there's a discourse forum that this information is coming from, so you can interact with it either way. But this diagram is what I wanted to show. It kind of gives a high-level overview once you sort of know how to read it. Let me see if I can. Well, my face is kind of covering up. What my face is covering up there on the right.
I'll get rid of it. Hold on.
Well, it's fine. I can just explain it. They're just partners. So Shapeshift, its main scope, the reason it exists, is to facilitate trading of cryptocurrencies, of crypto to crypto. So Bitcoin for Ethereum, or Tether for Bitcoin, or whatever, like different ERC20 tokens for one another. Just trying to facilitate crypto to crypto transactions. And so the big move that Shapeshift has done has to, instead being an exchange themselves, they are simply a front end for Uniswap and Thorchain and all these decentralized exchanges, so that they are no longer custodians. So they have partnerships with these other DAOs and other organizations in the Ethereum space and other exchanges. And they get revenues from that. So that's their primary revenue stream. I always believe in following the money. So that's where their money's coming from. The bulk of their money is coming. So that's the money into the DAO. But then their plan for governance moving forward are these work streams. And so they've broken up all the different aspects of their business into these different work streams. So they've got the product, they've got the marketing, they've got development, they've got just a work stream for focusing on progressive decentralization because they have to unwind their corporate structure. And then, they have a work stream for focusing on the token economics. And so each of these work streams gets like a work stream leader. And then that leader assembles squads of individuals, and then they execute. And so it's very similar to a hierarchical org chart that you'd see in a corporation, except that no one's actually employed here. What happens in terms of, again, following the money is the money coming into the DAO treasury gets, let me see if I can remember this. Basically, they submit proposals and then there's this whole proposal process. There's like the ideation phase, then there's a soft proposal, and then there's a hard proposal. And by the time it reaches the hard proposal thing, where people with Fox tokens actually vote on it, if it passes, then money is transferred from the treasury to the work stream account. And then the work stream leader has a key to access that work stream account. And that whole process of moving money from the treasury to the workstream account involves no humans. It's all smart contracts, and so this whole voting process does not involve any sort of administration. It's all smart contracts. No one can stop it or prevent it from happening. And so that's how the money gets to essentially a workstream leader who is answerable to the community, and then that work stream leader essentially, finds hopefully by the time they have a funded proposal, they've already found the individuals that are going to be actually executing on that plan. So not terribly complex if you just boil it down to those sort of high level things, and not dissimilar to how we've been doing things. We've just been doing them on a smaller scale. And so I'm hoping that we can mimic this, especially with the pay to write database. I think that there are many applications I can think of, like two off the top of my head is a decentralized exchange and a decentralized Craigslist that could make use of the pay to write database, which would provide us an income stream. And we already have the merit system. And so it wouldn't, we could move to smart contracts if that's what we need to do. I think there are other things that we can do native to the Bitcoin Cash blockchain or the X chain on Avalanche to integrate a lot of this functionality. But yeah, it's definitely inspirational. I'm gonna go ahead and stop sharing.
So quick question on the pay-to-write database. So we'll be using the PSF tokens. Is that the to pay? Is that the plan?
Yeah, so the way it works is anyone can read from the database, anyone can write to the database, but the consensus rules that ship by default is that in order to write to the database, you have to submit a proof of burn that you've burned 0.01 PSF tokens.
Oh, gotcha.
And so you submit a transaction ID, and then each individual copy of the database verifies it independently, and it'll go and it'll check that transaction ID to make sure that it burned at least that amount of PSF tokens, and then that's your ticket to add an entry to the database. And then from there, it gets replicated out to all the other instances of the database.
Wow. I mean, is there an example of this that's anything close to this that's out there? I've not heard of anything similar.
No, nothing like this has ever existed before. I mean, the idea is very similar to a blockchain.
Right.
Right. But, and so I like to call it's a database with blockchain-like qualities.
Awesome.
And it leverages Orbit DB, which is a IPFS-based database. And so really the only tweak I made was to the access control logic that determines who can and can't write to the database, to add that little hook to check transaction ID against the blockchain.
Yeah, amazing. That's great.
Going back to talking about Shapeshift a little bit, what I do like about this idea of bringing a proposal of something to the community and saying, I'm looking for funding for X, and then the community, you have to make your case, you have to state it, you got to convince the people that are part of the community that this is a good direction to go. And if you end up getting the funds and failing, well, you're probably not likely to get funds again. Whereas in a traditional corporate structure, you as the CEO could totally mess up a business and then move on to your next CEO job, and all the people that are part of the company are left to pick up the pieces. And so there's some accountability there that I really like about this structure. And
yeah, I think it's really helpful to compare and contrast it against Flipstarter, because what we've seen with Flipstarter is that people tend to fund like the noise, the loudest, most popular thing. And there aren't very many people funding those Flipstarters that are like thinking like, well, who is this person? And can they actually execute on this idea? Yeah. Because a lot of times they don't, and they can't. And so compare and contrast that with how Shapeshift is doing it, where there's the ideation phase, which is basically you start talking about it in the chat room and you start feeling people out. And then from there, you move to a forum post so that you can actually have long form discussion about it. And then you move from there to a soft proposal, which is like, it's not required, but it's a way to really test the waters and see if a proposal would actually pass, if there's enough interest in the community to actually pass a proposal. So while that's not required, it's highly recommended. And then you can move on to a hard proposal where people really vote on it, and real funds are involved. And so I love that like 4-stage process that they're developing.
Do you think that there are any negatives in terms of speed of action with this sort of process?
No, because there shouldn't be anything that is like immediately needed. I mean, and if you think about the scope, I mean, the scope is really critical here. Like Shapeshift is a product. They do a very specific thing they generate money doing that
Yep.
very specific thing. Like they're not going to go fund a new blockchain because that's just way outside the scope of what they're doing. They would never recoup those costs. So, I mean, I like the focus on the money, like money in, money out. The money in should be more than the money out. And everybody in the DAO is responsible for managing that collectively. And I want to apply that very same mentality to the PSF. I mean, we're producing things like end-to-end encryption for messages, and we're trying. One of the things I want to do, very first thing I want to do with the pay to write database is support the swap protocol and enable people to trustlessly trade tokens. That's a valuable service. People will pay for that. So we should be able to develop income streams as a DAO, and then spend those income streams to make the services that we provide more valuable. And so this is why I'm paying so close. I think Shapeshift is just such a great model for us to follow.
I love the fact that you're actually also building on Vin's, or is it his Cyprian? I don't follow his name anymore. His swap protocol, because I feel like that was a big move forward, and no one's really done with it. If you can take something like the pay to write database and make something that extends all of these other really great ideas, that's going to really change a lot in terms of how BCH and how these other like associate blockchains are actually adding huge amount of value that others aren't yet.
Yeah. Thank you. I mean, those are my thoughts exactly. When Vin came out with it, I immediately started dissecting it into its component parts and like trying to understand. Okay, like you've got this at the heart of it is this collaborative transaction idea, and then there's end-to-end encryption to allow all the parties to coordinate privately, and then and then there's other things. There's the whole data passing protocol, which is on chain. And that was like the only part of it that I wasn't like, didn't give me warm, fuzzy feelings. And so what I'd like to do is move that off chain onto the pay to write database so that this is much more practical at scale. And also would provide an income stream for the PSF if we did that. And that was my main objection to Vin, which, Vin's just an application developer. He's just building an application. It's not his problem to worry about scaling the blockchain. The blockchain's there. He's just trying to use it. But as someone who operates fullstack.cash, which is infrastructure as a service, it is my problem. And I can very clearly see how my problems are going to increase as the blockchain size increases. And so that's why I'm so passionate about moving the data off chain. I would like to live in a world where we pretty much just use pruned nodes, because those are much easier to decentralize and much easier to operate. So that's sort of, some people have asked me like, oh, am I building Swap? It's like, well, no, because Swap is really Vin's creation. I'm building something very similar to Swap, something that I hope will be backwards compatible with Swap. But yeah, uses a lot of the same ideas. And not only can you do token transactions, you can do escrow. That's the other use case of Swap that I'm very interested in. We need both. The token trading is trustless, so you don't need escrow for that. But to build a decentralized, uncensorable Craigslist, we are going to need escrow for that. And so Swap kills two birds with one stone.
In the chat, we have Adam Trebnikov says, speed seems to be irrelevant, which is a huge advantage in an automated process. So, yes.
Yeah.
Now,
plus, I want to come back to your question there about immediacy, because where I do see immediacy, or the need for immediacy and immediate action, is like, they do have a product, and let's say a server goes down. Well, someone's responsible for that, and that would be the work stream leader. So I'm paying very close attention to the engineering work stream, and a lot of the people who are currently Shapeshift employees are going to be those work stream leaders. I mean, they have to be voted in by the community, but right now that's not very hard because most of the community is the company. And so that's how they're making this transition. And so there will be one person in charge of, say, keeping the website up, who will get a phone call in the middle of the night if it's not up. And so all of that is still retained in the DAO structure. And I find that
all of that.
Yeah.
So
I want to mention something about Shapeshift. If I've been a Shapeshift user for the past, ever since it started. And if you if you have been, or if you've ever used them, go check your Ethereum wallet, because you might get an airdrop worth $500. I mean, literally, I made $500 worth of Shapeshift tokens just dropped into my Ethereum accounts. So
Nice.
just go check them. It's definitely worth it. Anybody who's watching later, I mean, it's real cash money. It's the first airdrop that's been given out in the past 2 years that's actually worth shit. I mean, it's
Yeah. And I think it ends at the end of this month. If you haven't
Right.
claimed them, there's a hook in that contract of the airdrop that will pull the tokens back and put them in the treasury. And that's what a lot of the people are kind of waiting for is like the treasury is going to get like 2 million. There's like $2 million just floating around in the air right now. And I think I don't know exactly what the date is. I think it's the end of this month. That anyone that hasn't claimed their airdrop, all those funds will get pulled back into the treasury.
So you can get benefit just by watching this video, because this is real money you can grab if you use it. Go ahead, Aaron. Sorry.
I was going to say, Aaron, if you've used Shapeshift in the past, they're going to distribute tokens. How's that working? So how do we know if we have tokens?
Yeah. So what I would say is everybody who's used Shapeshift or anyone who's used Rune, actually, if you have a Rune address, there's quite a few different things, but all you have to do is go through, look at your, go log into Shapeshift and look at your Ethereum account, and then paste that into, they have a little tool. It'll tell you if you have any. And I mean, I was surprised because there was 1,000 Fox tokens sitting there for me to click a button and get, and they're 53 cents a piece right now. So it's definitely worth doing. And it really takes about 3 minutes.
Yeah, so anybody who has used MetaMask over the last year, and like if you have your seed backed up but you haven't touched that wallet, like load it and check it, because that's where like some of your like if you don't even have to have used Shapeshift. Like if you've used Uniswap, which you may have used accidentally if you tried to switch into a stable coin, like yeah, that's the thing. Like just pull out all your Ethereum wallets and check them to see if there's anything there.
Nice. That was something I have a question about token distribution and how is it working with Shapeshift, and what are some good policies going forward for, because we've talked about merit, and we've talked about getting people into the community that may not have a lot of money, but they can put in time and earn merit that can be equivalent to a certain amount of tokens over time. How do we best approach handling the token distribution, which ultimately leads to, say, in the DAO?
Well, that's still very much an open-ended question, but one of the things I'm paying attention to with the Fox token is that they have never sold the Fox token. They've only rewarded it to people who have used Shapeshift. They have avoided selling it directly because that would potentially make them a security. And you can still, individual people can trade it. There is a market for them, but as a company, they have refrained from ever selling any tokens.
Interesting.
And so, but they've had these tokens. They've been sitting on them for quite a while. And in the next few months, I think it's like Eric Voorhees is going to get 5% of the total supply. Which is, he owns a third of the company, so that's actually a pretty big downgrade. And it's something like the Treasury is going to end up with like 40% of the tokens to distribute for work done, and they've never done that before. And it's going to be really interesting to see how that affects the value of the token. Like a few days ago, it was trading for 70 cents. I think it's kind of in the 50-cent range now. And so they're actually going to start, they've never used the token to actually like do things. And they're going to start that. And so the token value will probably fluctuate wildly. And so that'll be interesting to see, because we've had our own, we have our own closed economy where, we can produce as many PSF tokens as we want, but when we deploy those tokens to developers to get work done, they cash them out, and that causes the value to go down. So this is why it's so important for us as a DAO to focus on our income streams and build out our income streams, so that we don't just tank the price of our token.
Yeah.
And they're going to have that same challenge. They have not had it yet. They are going to go into it, and it'll be really interesting to see how they manage it.
Well, that's one of the ideas that I've thought about, and I was actually talking with a guy that I'm working with, Adam, he's in the chat. We were talking about the idea of, all right, if we build a company and then we create tokens for essentially ownership like a DAO, and then when we go to hire contractors to do the work, we give them an option of, we'll pay you in these tokens, but you can cash the tokens out for payment, or you can keep the tokens, which leads towards ownership, essentially. And maybe this is a way, I don't know, maybe this is a way that helps to weed out the people that are really serious. This one guy just wants to get paid to do web dev. That's fine. Or maybe he says, I'm going to take half of the money to do web dev and I'm take half of it in tokens and have some say in the community. And you watch people almost build up their standing that way. I don't know if it'll work that way. I know there are regulatory things. I'm not sure where this stands, because this is new territory, but I can see that as one way that you can make sure that people are serious about it.
Well, one way I could see this playing out, and this would naturally lead to a partnership between Shapeshift and PSF, so I'm kind of hoping this turns into reality, is that we as our own DAO could start, they're not very interested in the Bitcoin Cash blockchain, or they are a little bit interested in the Avalanche blockchain. If we can provide, a way to swap tokens on some of these blockchains that they don't have exposure to, that benefits their business. It benefits our business. I could definitely see a scenario where our DAO essentially becomes a contractor to their DAO, and they pay us in Fox tokens. And then as a DAO, we use those Fox tokens to vote on initiatives in the Shapeshift DAO that benefit us, and we vote proportionate to the amount of people with PSF tokens. So we get this sort of symbiotic, and they're doing this right now. They're reaching out. What did they reach out to? I'm forgetting some of the names, but there's multiple Ethereum-based organizations where they're giving them Fox tokens in exchange for their token, and so the dollar amount, it's net zero. But now the organizations are tied together. If the Fox token goes up, that organization benefits. If that organization's token goes up, the Fox token benefits. Yeah. So you're starting to see these strategic token swaps all over the place, and I would very much like us to get in on that.
Sounds great.
To Aaron's point, one of the things that I think interesting that hasn't been brought up is that a lot of the people that work for Shapeshift right now, because they're ERC20 tokens, there's a smart contract that's locked them so they can't be spent for 3 years. So they're more associating, trying to figure out how to take these people and want the value to go up. So when they are released, they can get the value that's higher, right? So to your point, I don't think SLP allows for those kind of thing. I don't know what's happening with Smart BCH or, how we can eventually get some of those smart contracts built in, but something like that to where you give out something so that people can eat today. Developers can do web dev and can eat tonight, right? Because they're hungry, but also have a stake long term. Those kind of things are really great. So I just love these ideas being thrown out and using somebody who's doing something different to add value to ours as well.
Yeah, that topic is something I'm very much trying to pay attention to, and I would like for us to collectively pay attention to that, because there are time locks. We can definitely lock SLP tokens up for an amount of time on the blockchain. There's also just multi-sig wallets. That's the easiest way to do it, is just put it in a multi-sig wallet, but then you're relying on humans to unlock it for you. And that has regulatory side effects, possibly. I don't know. But then there's all the EVM. There's the Smart BCH sidechain. There's the Avalanche blockchain. I'm keeping an eye on Smart BCH, especially in the last week. That things have really started moving there, and that's a natural fit for our Bitcoin Cash side of things. I'm also really paying attention to Avalanche because they've got zero conf. Their tokens are a first-class citizen in that they're miner validated. You can't burn them like you can SLP tokens. And they have the functionality now to move tokens from the X chain to the P chain. So you can write smart contracts They interact with a token that you can then move to the X chain, that you can then move across our bridge to the BCH, and then move again over to the eCash. So
Wow.
we already have most of the infrastructure in place for moving a token across 3 or 4 different blockchains, and so then we can leverage, whichever is the best for our business needs, in terms of whatever we want to do, say locking away a token and then distributing it over time, in an uncensorable way.
Amazing.
We have Adam in the chat says immediate payment is an incentive to keeping interest in non-token holders. This way we can cater to both worlds. And so, yeah, I think there's something to be said to giving an option. It's like you could have an option where you say, we can lock these up. They'll be like an escrow. We can give these to you now, or we can flat out pay you. And it almost would become like, well, if somebody wants to get paid less and hold on to these tokens and be able to have more voice in the organization, well, they've earned that through their actions,
That's interesting. Like you do 1x today or 2x, you actually get paid twice as much if you lock them, if you're willing to have them locked up, but you still get the merit from them or something,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, these are completely new areas. We're figuring this out. New ways of looking at how to run things. One other question I have is, how do we deal with the misguided charismatic leader problem? That's what I would coin it. The person that everybody gravitates to, but they're taking it in the wrong direction.
Well, I think this is why I'm watching Shapeshift so closely. I think they've cracked that nut in that the actual distribution of tokens is not under any one person's control, and that I mean, you are going. It's this paradigm of like, we need leaders, but not benevolent dictators, and so I think they've really cracked that nut. Where Eric Voorhees, who is the CEO, the commander of Shapeshift, the company, he's simply going to be an influential member of the DAO, and his whatever he says is always going to carry a lot of weight, and he's also going to have a significant amount of tokens to throw that weight around. But at the end of the day, he's just an influential member.
Well, his weight was earned too, through what he built. So I can see as well, a DAO works a little bit different than a company, because the community itself is dependent on the DAO doing well, and so therefore, so I can see some issues coming in, maybe have to be dealt with. Or can somebody come in and just corporate buyout and just a corporation buy a ton of tokens and then have a big say? Like, how would you deal with that sort of thing?
Yeah, that'll be interesting to see with Shapeshift DAO if some whale moves in, tries to buy a crap load of tokens, and then all the people who have been working hard and have been accumulating tokens, they're all of a sudden incentivized to sell a bunch, which means they are less influential. So yeah, I could definitely see like a negative feedback loop happening there.
Yeah.
For us, for our DAO, we've already anticipated this in the business plan, in that like the token is not terribly important, and this is one advantage we have over Ethereum tokens, in that on Ethereum you have smart contracts and a specific token that works with a specific contract, and to try and switch to a new token is like basically a non-starter. That is a very expensive. I don't even know how you do that. It would be a catastrophic event. But on the Bitcoin Cash blockchain using SLP tokens, if like worst case scenario, let's say I got hit by a bus or get black bagged by the government, well, all the software is open source. All we have to do is run a query on all the addresses holding PSF tokens, airdrop a new token, and then do a pull request to all the repositories to use the new token. That's like 4 hours of work, and we're humming along.
And probably $10 worth of cost transaction fees, right? It would be really inexpensive by comparison as well.
Yeah, I agree. And some of it can be too, like one of a consideration is, are tokens for a DAO open to the public, or is it, or are you do you distribute a different way? You know, we've always taken this idea of token distribution, like, here we go, everybody, buy the tokens, everybody in the world, instead of saying, well, maybe we don't do that. Maybe we have certain people that we know believe in this. We create tokens, distribute them to them. You have a treasury like you're talking about. You're distributing to people that work, and as people work, they move up in this way. And it would also keep it so, like with Shapeshift putting all these tokens out right away, you get a whale coming in, you get that negative feedback loop like you're talking about. But if you're building a company and you don't put those tokens out right away, and you start distributing those to the workers of the company, the only way for a whale to get them is through that slow trickle of distribution from those people that are actually working to build the company, right? So that could be another way to approach like a startup, where you're worried about somebody just coming in and crushing the thing right away. I mean, thoughts on that?
We're going to have to see how it plays out. I mean, honestly, this is a new paradigm. Like, there is no history on these things. No one's ever done these things before. Like, and it's all going to get tried, and some of it's going to be catastrophe, and some of it's going to be just amazing. And we're going to watch it all play out in the next like 5 years.
Yeah, and it is interesting because one of the reasons Craig Wright, and I'm not a big fan of the guy, but one thing he's right about is we've not really hit up against an full-on adversarial network yet. I mean, we have had no one who's come in and tried to take over like a concerted government-wide effort to do these things. So like he's saying, I don't need to make friends because eventually it's going to be a big adversarial issue. And so I'm not going to make friends. I don't care about that. I'm going to be a shithead to everybody. You know, so it is interesting to see, you know, make sure that we're building something that's not just friends that work together, but also can combat an adversarial. And I think it's a good point. Someone comes in and buys a whole bunch, and what do you do?
That's worth dwelling on for a moment, because my feeling on that topic is that it's fiction. It will never see an adversarial situation. I mean, particularly Craig Wright's usually referring to hash wars, which, like, if you look at Avalanche, or you look at the Avalanche protocol that ABC is integrating into eCash, they already have the token distribution. That's important. I mean, there's so much nuance here, and I'm going to gloss over a lot of it. But assuming that you already have an even token distribution, that's a big assumption. But like, you can look at eCash and they already have that. You can look at Avalanche; they're getting there. Assuming you have even token distribution for a Bitcoin Cash blockchain, using pure Nakamoto consensus, so Bitcoin Cash, if their price, the same thing could happen to them that happened to BSV, and that an adversary could, with more hash, could just shit all over their blockchain and make it, essentially unusable and unreliable. But eCash can't, because they have post consensus. So all the users, not just the miners, but the users and the exchanges and everybody else that's not a miner but has a stake in that blockchain operating correctly, they all have a chance to coordinate using post consensus to fight off a miner with greater hash. And so the network, which has an incentive, a strong incentive to continue to function properly, can fend off that one sort of adversarial situation, which is usually what Craig Wright is referring to. Yeah. And because there really is no other serious attack vector other than that, when you're talking about state actors. Yeah, state actors, but regulation and hash. I think that's pretty much the two main ones. Mm-hmm. Unless you try to flood 1,000 Twitter bots, take down somebody's because they just can't get through with all the crap. But is there just I really hope that it goes the way you're talking. So my point is the really obvious attack vectors that still exist, which there's not very many of them, are getting solved. If they haven't been solved yet, which really only leaves, I one of the analogies that I'm fond of giving is that, how do you herd developers? Because they're not sheep. They're more like cats. How do you herd cats? Well, you don't goad them with a stick. You put treats and you invite them to come where you want them to go. And I think that is the paradigm that we've moved into with crypto, is that violence is a non-option. They're just, right. You can't use the stick anymore. The only thing you have available is the carrot. And so while we probably will see drama and maybe networks having fights with other networks, like blockchains having fights with other blockchains, there won't be anything that resembles violence there. It will only be a voluntary, like, I like these people better than these people, and therefore I'm going to use this product and not that product.
That's a great analogy. Wow.
Yeah. No, I think that's great. And to pull this back a little bit to the topic of merit, maybe this is another way. Like, you've created this idea of merit and tokens, and maybe you weren't the first one, but this can be another way to stop that whale from coming in, because that whale might buy those tokens, but he may not have the merit to be that. They may not be charged, so to speak, up with the merit and able to act, right? So
also also in the past, there's been this threat of like miners getting more than 51% of the network, which is sort of equivalent to, in proof of stake, a whale moving in and taking and having a disproportionate say. The risk of that whale, so that in the past, the risk of the too much mining power is that, you're sort of eroding trust in the blockchain at that point. So it's in the best interest of that mining pool to then like break apart and so that no one pool has more than 51% of the hash rate. In proof of stake, these whales that could have a disproportionate influence because they accumulate too much, that they have an incentive to not do that, because all the other minor players could just, like in the case of PSF, if that happened with PSF, well, if that one whale was trying to throw their weight around, everyone that's not that whale could essentially just fork off and airdrop tokens to everyone that's not the whale. And just, that's basically how they just shove the whale out of the system.
Yeah.
And keep on chugging along.
These are great ideas for how these things can work. Questions we need to ask ourselves as we venture into this territory. And I think these are some great solutions to those problems.
Yeah. Well, it's been about an hour. I think we should probably wrap this up. It's been a great meeting as usual. Awesome.
So we will see everybody next week for the ComCom meeting, and Chris and I are planning on doing another video Friday, so should hopefully have that up Friday or Saturday for you, and you guys can check that out. And Aaron, you got a great name. Thanks for joining us. And
Rucknium had one thing to say. I think he wanted. Can we give him a second?
Yeah.
Well, I was actually just going to recommend that we move it over to the Telegram room.
Oh, gotcha.
I want to hear what he has to say too. But we should probably wrap this up. He says he's launching a flip starter for the Cash Fusion Red team. Part of it's to make this more feature complete, and he shared a link. Okay, Rucknium, please share that in the Telegram room, and for everyone, if you don't know where the Telegram room, go to psfoundation.cash. That's our website. Scroll to the bottom, go to the footer. There's a Telegram link right there. That'll take you to the Telegram room. And that's where we're going to continue this conversation, and that's where the main conversations are happening.
All right. We'll talk to you guys later, and stay safe. All right. Bye.